So, I have made several Gyre videos and each one was an improvement on itself. Like, I just recently released a Gyre video not too long ago. I really like the idea of this frame because electric powers are cool. But now I finally have all the Townforge shards I need to fully make this into a properly min-max Gyre build that absolutely destroys, or builds rather, because there are two variants of this loadout. And the best part is that you can start off nuking right away without the need to build up any conditional strength arcanes, while also gaining a massive damage multiplier and one button press full armor strip as you watch everything around you disintegrate. What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video coming at you with the Overkill Gyre builds. So, Gyre is an okay frame, but still has a lot of setbacks, and unfortunately stuck with one playstyle and gameplay loop. And to top it all off, she has a mandatory augment that makes her 5 billion times better to play. Otherwise, just use any other frame at that point. She's an amazing ability DPS Warframe. She doesn't instantly nuke everything but can clear high-level content with ease, if built in a certain way. But first, let's start with an important thing to help you understand why she nukes the way she nukes. Starting off with her unique and interesting passive. Gyre is currently the only Warframe that gains crit chance and crit damage on her abilities from applying status effects. Oh yeah. She gains a flat 10% crit chance on her damaging abilities per electric status effect, affecting individual targets, and you deal 2 times the critical damage against those affected units. This essentially means you want to heavily prioritize proccing multiple electric procs on a group of enemies to boost your outgoing damage, otherwise you tickle them. This crit chance increase has a cap of 300%, which is red crit territory. So yes, her abilities can and will red crit and reach a 4 times critical damage boost. However, priming alone isn't enough to supplement all your critical buffs. This is where you pair her passive with her third ability, Cathode's Grace. When activated, you gain weapon and ability crit chance along with energy regen, and all scale with strength. And the crit bonus you get to your weapons is modded crit, meaning not a flat increase like Avenger, but an additive bonus to your modded crit. And if you have no crit mods, it will still function similar to a mod multiplying your base value. If you did not get that, the crit buff is like putting point strike on your gun, and the buff is additive to the point strike. And when you combine her passive and Cathode's Grace, she can increase the overall ability crit, allowing her to hit the max of 300% fairly easily. The thing that hurts this ability is that it's on a timer, along with a 60-second cooldown. And to upkeep this ability duration, you have to get direct kills with Gyre, or enemies under the effects of electricity, or assists from allies. So the main way Gyre deals damage and kills enemies is with her 4th ability, Rotor Swell. This ability deals AoE electric damage, triggers the electric Telsa status effect to cause a chain reaction of electric procs, stunning and dealing damage over time, while also granting you movement speed at the same time. But the best part of Rotor Swell is that it has another mechanic, Discharge. When you inflict a crit with either your weapons or abilities, you will release a lightning discharge that chains outwards, hitting targets within a 10-meter radius. Unfortunately, this discharge does have a small line of sight check, and the discharge has an internal cooldown of 1 second before it can discharge again, meaning you need to prime enemies while your 4th ability is active to create more consistent discharges every 1 second. So now, here comes the one thing that makes her 3rd and 4th ability feel a lot better to maintain and pretty much removes the additional micromanagement, Cathode's Currents. The mandatory augment. With this augment equipped, you can release an additional discharge from Rotor Swell while extending its duration with enemies killed. And it also grants Rotor Swell's discharge a 200% damage increase. That means as long as you're killing, you never ever have to recast your abilities ever again. And you also gain additional damage and more consistent and additional discharges. Now, this all sounds dandy, but her damage does fall short when armor is introduced. Yes, even with the armor changes. Completely removing armor from the equation significantly boosts your damage to the next level. But now, what exactly is used to remove armor? Before that, let's discuss her first two abilities, which are not worth using. Her first doesn't do that much damage, and her second ability can group enemies, but it doesn't do a good job at it because of the horrible line of sight issues, and it is anti-synergistic with physics because it's horribly coded. So when you're going to replace an ability, it doesn't matter what you remove. Both the first two abilities are S tier in the mid department. Now, for the two options in helmets to make her pop off, we have Pillage and Terrify. There are pros and cons to both of these abilities. Let's start off with Pillage. When you cast this ability, you send out a pulse wave that follows you and steals enemies' defenses, meaning shields and armor. Once the wave reaches the end, it retracts, restoring your missing shields and grants you overshields based on the amount of defenses stolen. Pillage also cleanses you and allies of negative status effects. But here's the kicker though. You need 400% strength to fully strip in one cast. You can, however, cast the ability multiple times to get the full strip, but that's just a waste of energy and very inefficient. This is why you can pair the ability with the Aura Corrosive Projection to reduce the amount required to 328% for a single cast full strip. The pulse initial radius is affected by your range, however the additional expansion, meaning how far it will expand once it hits its apex, is affected by duration. The other useful thing to note is that Pillage can strip Acolyte armor. Great for survivability because of the shield replenishment and status cleansing. The armor strip is also permanent, and the ability has good casting animation. The other flaw, besides the enormous amount of strength you need, is that it does have a slight line of sight check. Now, on to Terrify. This is a crowd control and armor stripping ability. Once cast, you release a wave that instantly strips enemy armor and sends them running away from you in fear. It doesn't affect any boss type units, and it doesn't strip shields. You need 168% strength to fully strip with the ability, and the armor strip does go through walls. However, the issues with the ability is that it costs more energy to cast, the animation is slower, the armor strip isn't permanent, it cannot armor strip acolytes, and it has an enemy limit that scales with strength. And unfortunately, it doesn't have any sort of survivability merit. So it really depends on what you want. Now, let's take a look at the gameplay loop to help you understand what's actually happening here. For my Pillage setup, I will be using the Madurai Focus School because there are no casting speed mods or Archon shards on this loadout. So one transference grants me 50% casting speed, and this makes her third ability tolerable to cast because it has god-awful animations. Once that's done, spam your primer that is modded for viral and electric, armor strip, and watch everything die. For the Terrify setup, you'll be running Zeneric. But if you do want to run Madurai, that's also up to you. But Zeneric is good here for the energy orb pickup increase and that energy regen over time. So standing in Hardened Wellspring gives you 20% strength, and when enemies spawn, you prime them to trigger the Growing Power aura, to then cast your abilities and just continue killing, similar to the Pillage loadout. The only thing that's different is the starting setup. I have the Nautilus Sentinel using the Cordon Precept, as this pulls in enemies for me, so I have consistent grouping. Alright, let's take a look at how I am min-maxing Gyre for the optimal damage output. And that's where we take a look at the Archon shards. Those, of course, are going to be the purple Talforge shards that multiply your ability damage on enemies when they're affected by the electric stats effect. I was led to believe that this multiplier was similar to Roar, but it's a unique damage modifier that is only available on Archon shards. It also doesn't double dip with any damage over time effects, but it's a huge damage buff for Gyre nonetheless. Notice that I have one slot open here. This is dependent on what you want to build and the playstyle you want to focus on. For you to understand and fill up the final piece, let's take a look what to expect from each variant of the build. Now first, the Pillage loadout. I will have 322% strength, still not enough for a full armor strip. With a red shard on its final slot, I will have 322 with a regular and 337 with a Talforge. This way, I free up an arcane slot for more utility. However, for that additional 15% boost, you would either have to run Molt Augmented or Void Sling every 20 seconds. And I feel that's not really worth it, so I will slot in a red shard instead. Although for the Terrify loadout, those concerns are thrown out the window, and you can go full 5 purple shards. However, we'll have other things to worry about pertaining to the Terrify helmet itself. Now, this is where you decide which loadout you want to use, but to keep it simple and straightforward, Pillage is by far the better option because it gives you so many additional features while also making you survive better. So red is going to be my final shard. Now, for my arcanes, I'll be running Arcane Energize for the massive energy regen with orb pickups. This is going to be an arcane for both of the builds. And the second arcane that will be used on the Pillage loadout is Arcane Steadfast. This has a 20% chance after using your abilities to give you 3 free ability casts that don't consume energy. And this pairs really well with Mystic Bond on your companion. And when both of these are combined, you have 4 free ability casts. While on the Terrify loadout, I will be running Arcane Aegis instead for some additional survivability. Starting off with the Pillage build, you have Corrosive Projection in the Aura for the 18% armor strip that stacks with Pillage. In the Exilus, I have a foot maxing mod, Prime Surefooted. If she didn't need a foot maxing mod or the augment, you could have run Power Drift instead, which replaces the need to run that red Archon shard. So now you can have full 5 Tauforge purples. For our strength increases, I have Transient Fortitude, Blind Rage, Umbral Intensify, and Augur Secrets. All of these grant me 322% strength. Prime Flow for the large energy pool, Archon Stretch for the range and energy regen, along with Augur Reach, giving me 175% range. This gives me a great coverage on my Rotor Swell and armor stripping abilities. And finally, the mandatory augment. All of this to complete the Pillage Gyre build. For the Terrify version, a few things will change. We're going to reduce the strength to accommodate utility and survivability. Dropped Corrosive Projection, Augur Secrets, and Blind Rage. To fit in Growing Power in the Aura, this is going to be used at the beginning of the mission to prime enemies to get that strength increase, while you have the effects of your Focus School, which in this case is going to be Zenric, then Caster 3 and 4. And Adaptation for the additional survivability that pairs really well with Arcane Aegis. And finally, Natural Talent, so you can cast your Terrify faster. With this setup, you'll be running 5 purple Tauforge shards to greatly boost your damage. But unfortunately, you can't strip Acolytes, so you need a weapon that will help you kill Acolytes, while also being able to deal with nullifiers. And that will be the Miter Incarnate. It's modded for raw damage, crits, corrosive, and the Neutralizing Justice augment to pump nullifier bumbles if you were to take this into a corrupted mission. Otherwise, take a heavy weapon like the Kuvazar or Kuva Brahma and follow the same modding principle and one-tap those Acolytes. And for my primer, that is the weapon that I'll be using to debuff the enemies, and that is the Epitaph. It's an AoE secondary that has innate blast and cold procs, which will pair well with your modded elements. And in this case, it's going to be viral, radiation, and electric. Apply this on enemies for the consistent nuking with her 4, and the radiation mod there is also going to be great because it confuses enemies, and if you were in a corrupted mission with ancient healers, this completely allows you to nullify their ancient healer aura on their allies, so less overguard. And finally, moving on to my companion, Nautilus. It's a simple loadout. The weapon really doesn't matter. All you're going to need is Cordon, Guardian for that additional survivability, Manifold Bond, and Mystic Bond. These are the important mods for this build. And finally, for additional utility in the movement department, I am using the Praetus with its speed and parkour evolutions, making Gyre move even faster and leap higher. All right, folks, we're finally, hopefully, good God, we're done with the Gyre updates. I mean, if there's a new augment around the corner, we're definitely going to be making another video. But anyway, that has been it from me, folks. I do hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Please do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace. Bye-bye now.